Hello anime and manga fans, I'm Kyle Glockner, and welcome to the final official episode of Animanga. It has been a long 3 years of reviewing anime here on Goof, and I have loved every second of it. I spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted my final anime review to be, and I couldn't see myself doing anything other than what I consider to be my favorite anime of all time. So today, I'll be talking about Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Fullmetal Alchemist takes us on a journey with Edward and Alphonse Elric as they seek out the Philosopher's Stone in order to reclaim their original bodies, which they lost after trying to bring their mother back to life using alchemy. Now, for a quick clarification, you may be aware that there are two Fullmetal Alchemist anime adaptations, one from 2003 and another from 2009. The 2003 Fullmetal adaptation started out following the manga, but started to break off about a third of the way through the series, and it wasn't very good. But then in 2009, a new Fullmetal Alchemist project was released titled Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. This was a faithful adaptation of the manga and is an infinitely better series. However, there are some fun little tidbits between these two series. For one, the original 2003 anime contains episodes that adapt some chapters of the manga that weren't included in the 2009 Brotherhood adaptation. I'm not really sure why these episodes weren't included, but it's always something I found pretty interesting. Now, I know I haven't talked about it in a while, but I'd like to take a quick second to talk about the manga of Fullmetal Alchemist. As I just mentioned, Brotherhood completely followed the manga and is the most faithful adaptation of Hiromu Arakawa's work, and I can't honestly think of any significant chapters that weren't included in either Brotherhood or the 2003 series. Having read the manga, I have to say I was able to enjoy it just as much as I did watching the series. I think it's incredibly impressive when action and movement are so well portrayed through the still panels of a manga chapter, and while I will admit that my viewing of the anime may have influenced my perception of these scenes, I still think it is impressive as a standalone work. Anyway, that's enough of that, it's time to get into the actual review. The first thing that drew me into Fullmetal was the setting. The series is set in a fictional country called Amestris and is modeled like an alternate universe early 1900s era Germany, which is all well and good, but the main thing I loved about the world of Fullmetal is how the concept of alchemy is portrayed. For those unaware, alchemy was a forerunner to what we now know as chemistry and is based around the transformation of matter, creation of medicines, as well as the concept of equivalent exchange. In Fullmetal Alchemist, alchemy is nearly on the same level as magic or sorcery. The characters in Fullmetal are able to manipulate matter in all kinds of unique and creative ways, such as Roy Mustang's flame alchemy or Edward's technique of transforming some of the metal on his arm into a blade. Learning about all of the different ways characters use alchemy is one of the most exciting things about the world this series takes place in. I could say much more on the concept of alchemy, but I'll save that for my next point. Moving on to the animation, I've talked about this studio several times before, but this was my first introduction to Bones Inc., and it was an amazing first impression. As a refresher, you've probably seen their work on shows like Soul Eater, Space Dandy, Kekkai Sensen, Mob Psycho 100, Bungo Stray Dogs, and My Hero Academia. I genuinely believe that Brotherhood is some of Bones' best work. While the world Fullmetal is set in is admittedly pretty standard as far as fantastical elements are concerned, Bones did an amazing job making everything look incredible. No matter what you're looking at when watching Fullmetal, it looks absolutely gorgeous and still rivals many anime of today, which is especially impressive considering that it just celebrated its 10th anniversary on April 5th of this year. Another aspect of Bones that has always impressed me is the way they handle action scenes. There are a lot of various fights in Fullmetal Alchemist, and some of them remain some of the most impressive fight scenes I have seen in anime. Between the amazing choreography of each character, to the pacing and flow of each battle, down to the various weapons and abilities used by each character, a fight scene is a feast for the eyes where not a second is wasted by Bones. Some of my favorite examples include Edward and Alphonse versus the Slicer brothers and Barry the Chopper, the all-out fight against Father and Greed after Ed and Ling escape Gluttony, Alphonse versus Pride and Kimberly, as well as the fight that precedes that one for that matter, and Wrath's assault on Central. But above all, the animation of the various styles of alchemy was what impressed me the most with this show. As I said before, there are several different types and styles of alchemy between all the different characters of this show, and they all look incredible. Some of my favorites include Mustang's flame alchemy, Scar's destructive alchemy, Envy's transformations, and Greed's armor, but that's not to discredit any other aspect of the animation. Now, I made a very similar point in my ReZero review, but one of my favorite things about Fullmetal is that every single character is important to the overall plot. Despite the gigantic cast of characters in Fullmetal, I can't think of a single character that gets simply written out or just kinda disappears from the plot without making a significant contribution in one way or another. But even more significant than that, our main cast is one of the most solid across any show I have ever seen. From the state alchemist to the homunculi and all the soldiers in between, we have some of the best examples of character development across fiction. And while that may be a bold claim, I will stand by it when I consider characters like Scar, Greed, Kimberly, Roy Mustang, Hohenheim, the Armstrong siblings, Maze Hughes, Führer King Bradley, Ling, the Chimeras, Mei Cheng, and of course our main protagonists, Edward and Alphonse Elric. And of course, the list goes on and on from there. Some of my favorite characters of all time come from Fullmetal Alchemist, and I'd like to give a special mention to many of the series' antagonists. The various opposing forces of Fullmetal Alchemist are amazing in the sense they aren't just your run-of-the-mill baddies. Regarding the homunculi in particular, while the concept of a set of antagonists representing the 7 deadly sins isn't necessarily new or unique in any way, I feel like, especially for the time the series is written, the homunculi have a unique moral ambiguity to them, in the sense that you can't really completely hate any of them in my opinion. Don't get me wrong, for the most part, they still very much remain as villains, but I see them as some of the most well-written antagonists across anime. But as for the antagonists of Fullmetal as a whole, they each have their own philosophies and ideals that they act on, and I can't think of a single one who is made up of pure malice and hate, or at least doesn't have some redeeming quality at some point in their arc. Except Shao Tucker, he is the literal worst and only deserves misery. Tying into the characters, I'd like to now talk about my absolute favorite aspect of Fullmetal, which is its plot. Of all things, a show without a solid plot has no legs to stand on. It doesn't matter how good your characters are, how interesting the setting is, how beautiful the animation looks, or anything else if you don't have a solid story to tell when you put all of these pieces together. While admittedly dragging just a bit in the very beginning, once the plot of Fullmetal gets going, it doesn't stop until the end of episode 64. With as large a cast as we have at play here, I feel like the show does an amazing job of switching between the different characters throughout the episodes, which help not only to keep the action dragging on one point or character for too long, but help to build up various elements of the plot from different perspectives, which just added to the significance of each character as they made significant contributions to the overarching plot. As I said before when talking about the characters, there are a lot of different beliefs and ideals at conflict throughout Fullmetal, as characters learn the truth behind some of the events in their past, and overall I just really love how complete this story is. I can't think of a single loose end that isn't tied up by the end of the series, or a resolution that wasn't satisfying. But now, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my more personal connection with this show. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was my official introduction to anime because, let's be honest, Pokemon doesn't count. I remember turning on my TV late one night and catching it on Toonami, and I was immediately hooked. I had never seen anything like it, and it started me down this deep rabbit hole that is anime and manga. Through that, I've watched and read some amazing series, gotten to go to some fantastic places, and met some of my best friends through our connections to anime. In fact, I'd be lying if I said my decision to move to Japan after graduating wasn't partially inspired by my love for anime and manga. But my absolute favorite part about all of this has been being able to talk about these shows here on Goofing Off and sharing what I love with anyone who will listen. Hardly anything made me happier than having someone on Goof tell me they're going to watch the show I just talked about. I've covered such a large variety of shows, from action, to mystery, to slice of life, to romantic comedy, to mecha, sports, horror, and just about everything else in between. Anime is such a niche medium in itself that it's uniquely able to be the umbrella that covers shows of all kinds of genres, and I can absolutely say I would not have watched half the shows I've watched if they hadn't appeared on a seasonal anime list or while I was scrolling through Crunchyroll. To say that anime and manga are part of the reason my life is where it is today would be an understatement, and Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was the spark that allowed all of this to happen. Overall, if it wasn't obvious enough, I adore Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood. Stripping away all bias towards this series, I genuinely believe that it is objectively one of the best anime you can treat yourself to. There are so many other little aspects of it that I couldn't possibly cover in my allotted time on Goofing Off, but go check it out for yourself and learn what made me love it just as much as I do. Fullmetal Alchemist Brotherhood was directed by Yasuhiro Iri, written by Hiroshi Onogi, and animated by Bones Inc., while the original manga was written by Hiromu Arakawa. I truly believe this series is the best anime has to offer, so please go check it out and give it all of the love it deserves. And that was my final review on Animanga. It has been an amazing 3 years sharing my love of anime and manga to all of you, and while there are several other series I could have reviewed in the place of others, I wouldn't change a thing. And with that, I'm Kyle Glockner, and this has been Animanga.